All right, welcome to YWR. We're going to do another tech talk today. Our last tech talk was about AI workflows using Retool, autonomous workflows. Today we're going to dive into the YWR Intelligence Reports. These were the automated AI investment reports that we launched a few weeks ago, and you can find them at www.ywr-intelligence.world. So the background is that a lot of us are very comfortable using AI, using Gemini, OpenAI, Claude to do deep research on companies and for our investment analysis. But I want to start moving us or start exploring the idea of building even more sophisticated tools and moving out of the chat box and just exploring what you can do with a little bit of coding. The goal tonight is I'm going to go through a couple code snippets behind the YWR Intelligence Reports, and then we're going to bring in Brad Jelinek, who is a YWR reader and was the inspiration behind these reports, and he built them. And so we're going to learn about his background, how he uses them, and also a little bit of inspiration about what can be done with AI coding. So let's first go into a little bit of the code behind the reports. Okay. So this is the first page of a report on Coupang. It's about 5 or 6 pages, but this is just the first page. And what you'll see is this is mostly quantitative data, the earnings release dates, share price, data on the comparables, data on valuations, data on historical revenue growth. That's all coming from a financial API directly, and that's kind of the API call for that's quite hard coded. That one, the key point was we wanted to almost segregate, make sure that the financial data is coming in directly and is not being hallucinated in any way by the AI. So in a sense, we're going to make sure we're working with proper financial data. Now, the first part of the report, it's about 5,000 lines of code, but the first 30, we're going to import about 30 libraries. It's a mix of libraries from Anthropic and OpenAI, libraries for writing PDF reports, libraries for creating SQL tables, NumPy, but just sets up everything we're going to need to work with. Now, because we're dealing with stocks, there's a lot of peculiarities around dealing with tickers, and one of them is ADRs. If a user might just be using an ADR they're familiar with on the New York Stock Exchange, but the financial API is only able to pull historical financial data from the local market ticker. So if someone says BP in New York, we need to map that to BP in the London market. Another thing is we need to know what exchange rates we're dealing with prices. So we look at what exchange the ticker's on, and map that to a price that the share price is going to be in. So if it's a European exchange, these prices are going to be in euros, and if it's in the UK, it'll be pounds. And that's important because we need to also see what currency they're reporting in versus what currency the share price is in. Example is Glencore is a lot of resource stocks do this. Well, they report in dollars, but the share price will be in the local currency on the exchange. And Glencore, another little wrinkle to it is that it's in pence, not pounds. So a lot of these things we have to set up and kind of create rules for and logic for in the beginning. So next, we're going to start building our data. So we're going to build an SQL data table with all the financial data we want to collect for this report, as well as an AI analysis that we're going to do later. So there's going to be fields for all the financial data, but then stuff like the narrative analysis, the bull case, the bear case, the transcript analysis. Now, a big thing I think as we'll get better at AI, one of the key skill sets will be curating and assembling the data that you want the AI to work on, so you know the sources and you know what data it's working with, rather than just sending it out to the internet to go search things. So an example is with news articles. We're going out to Yahoo Finance in this block, and pulling the 10 last news articles. So that way you're control, and we're pulling them in and going to give that to work with on the news section. We also need, so we're going to pull in the financial data, but another example in this report is we need to pull in FX rates. So we need to go get that done too. So now that we've pulled in our FX rates, our historical financial data, the news articles we need, we can start doing the AI analysis. Now, before we ask the AI kind of these broad questions, we got to give it a lot of context, especially for things like analyze the narratives around a stock. So we gave, before, in this part of the API call out to OpenAI, we include in the prompt examples of narratives for certain sectors. Like in healthcare, a narrative to look for might be GLP-1 revolution, Medicare Advantage changes. In technology, it could be cybersecurity threats, cloud migration, or in financials, it could be Basel III changes. So all these things, we're going to start giving it lots of context for its response. Another one is in the transcript evolution analysis. So we started by analyzing one transcript, but we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we analyze 3 transcripts? And so see if we can find changes that evolve between 3 quarters ago and 1 quarter ago. How are they Are they, the targets changing? Is the questioning changed? So, but a couple things here. First, we had to also tell the AI what the chronological order of these transcripts. The first one in the array is the most recent. The third is the first one. So it's gonna start chronologically from that third transcript. And the also then what do we want you to look for? So lots of prompting, guidance changes. Track how guidance was revised each quarter, raised, maintained, lowered, withdrawn. Key metrics progression. How have the main KPIs evolved quarter by quarter? Strategic evolution and consistency. Track strategic themes and prioritize across all 3 calls. Persistent themes. What strategic topics appear in all 3 calls? Abandoned initiatives. What was heavily discussed but no longer mentioned? Strategic pivots. Any major changes in business direction or focus area. So we're giving it lots of things that we would naturally know to think about and notice in a call, but maybe the AI doesn't know that's what we want to look for. Bull case prompting. So with the financial data, we wanted it just straight from the financial API. But there are cases where AI strength is in its kind of creativity and connecting the dots and pattern analysis. So with the bull case, we want it to open up and be creative. So we're gonna prompt it with build the bull case for the stock. Focus on underappreciated strengths the market might be missing due to sentiment, anchoring bias, or lack of sexy headlines. Consider hidden competitive advantages not obvious. Unsexy but valuable attributes, consistent cash generation, boring but essential products, optionality or growth vectors the market hasn't priced in, capital light business model, strong operating cash flow, funding growth without debt. What would make a contrarian investor excited about this misunderstood stock? So we really wanted to have some cool, edgy bull cases. And then for the bear case, now bear cases I think are a really useful tool in asset management research, because often a lot of people are not wired to think about the bear case and think about how the management's lying to them and how the whole thing might not work as planned. And also in an IC setting, it might be a bit sensitive to rip apart your colleague's stock or idea that they've been working on. So you can use the AI as the bad guy and ask the AI to write the bear case on a stock. So I think that's a very useful thing. So build the bear case, really poke holes in this investment thesis. Consider all these risk factors. Is this a capital intensive business requiring constant reinvestment? Is there concentration risk with the top 10 customers over 30% of revenue? Now, is that non-founder management playing quarterly EPS games rather than building long-term value? Is the moat actually weak or easily replicable by well-funded competitors? Is this mostly a story stock or narrative play with minimal actual earnings? Is there technological disruption risk? What would make a short seller salivate over this stock? So hopefully they give the AI lots of ways to look at this and to build a bear case. And so now that we've pulled in financial data, FX rates, news articles. We've prompted the AI, sent out the API calls now, and we have these responses for the AI analysis sections, transcript analysis. We can start to build out the tables for the report and the charts. And so this is the first page. It's all, like, as I said, it's very, there's just analytical, numerical data in this. There's a chart later on. These are just snapshots, not the whole. I didn't want to go through the whole thing, but here you see there's the start of the earnings call analysis, where we ask it to analyze the last three evolution of Coupang's story across the last three calls, which I think is kind of useful. After a slower headline start in Q1, reported growth reaccelerated to 16% in Q2. Red flag analysis. So this is at the end of the report. This is something we added recently. Let's just look for red flags and go through some of the main ones. So one of the things we look for, is there a lot of management turnover in the key management positions? Legal review, are there any big court cases showing up that you might just want to know about? Capital structure, does it look like they're doing a lot of issuance? And then, are there any notable short seller reports? I'm not sure we're going to capture 100% of these, so do your own analysis, but it's helpful, I think. Okay, so that's the end of that. Well, now let's go talk to Brad about how he uses them and how his experience is building these reports.
All right, we're back with Brad Jelinek. Brad, we've been through the reports and been through some of the coding and really highlighted a lot of the intensive prompting that goes into the pieces of the report, like the narrative analysis and the transcript evolution and the bull case and the bear case, and just to get people to appreciate how much kind of thought goes into those questions and to really set up the AI with the types of things we want it to look for. But I said this idea really came from you, and we were interacting and talking, and you brought this to my attention. You said, hey, this is what I've built. Let's talk. We always share ideas about investment processes and investment tools. And you said, hey, I just want to show you what I'm using and what I built. And I saw this thing and I was like, whoa, that is super cool. How did you do that? How does it work? And so that's why I thought it's it's good to introduce you to everyone at YWR. But first, Brad, do you want to you're based in Madison, I think, right now. Do you want to give everyone just your background, your trading style and background, and how you got into all this?
Sure, I'll do the highlight reel here. So I just moved to Madison with my family, two little kids, about 2 weeks ago. So I'm from northern Wisconsin. I went to school in Madison, and then I moved to Chicago for about 13 or so years, downtown Chicago. Then my family and I moved to Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle for 8 years. And now we're back in Madison. So that's been our path.
Back to the good old Midwest.
Yeah, the good old Midwest. It's back. So it's good to be back, I guess. So that's that situation there. But for me, just since I was little, junior high school or even earlier, just lived in a small town in northern Wisconsin with no trading or market stuff around me, and just found myself gravitating towards it. I kind of feel like it found me more than I found it, if that makes sense. And I started to get involved with it in junior high, high school, and then I traded the tech run up in 99 to 2000, and just, ass backwardly made some money, didn't know what I was doing, and then lost a lot of it. Did buy a car though, I bought a Volkswagen, so I kept a little bit of it. And then I went to school in Madison, I got a finance degree, and didn't really end up using that, but I had to get something. So, and then I went to a career fair after and got a job at a prop trading firm in Chicago for which took me about 10 to 12 years, I believe. I was there till 2015. And then I went on my own. And so now, fast forward to the future, I kind of am this mixture of
Brad, sorry, just 1 second. When you were in Chicago, what were you trading? Everything, agricultural stuff, or was it financial futures, or I don't know if you had a specialty at all, or maybe you trade anything.
They brought me in to start the equity trading department. And when I say brought me in, I got 21, 22 years old. So it's kind of,
okay.
Yeah, brought me in. But most guys were trading bond market, like Bund in Europe. And shots and US 10-year and 30-year, things like that, 5-year. So I moved into the equities, S&Ps, mostly the DAX and the Euro stocks. So I started with that and had to learn from others who were around me. And that's where I kind of figured out, like, what special skills do I maybe have? What am I not good at? And one of the things I have been good at is staying curious, trying new ideas, new trends, and also latching on to people who know what they're doing, who are going the same direction as me, and figuring out how we can work together. And so I really took a lot of pieces from a lot of people along the way to kind of create, and that I've used that every step of the way. So even through till now, which I've had like probably 3 or 4 major reinventions. And after 22 or so years in the market, just this is my full-time thing, so I don't have a normal job. You have to reinvent yourself. And this AI thing has been another big reinvention period.
So Brad, how did this report come about? I mean, you showed it to me. It was, how did you get building this?
Yeah, so I have a really interesting friend I've met in outside of Seattle, and he was using he has a VC background, and he was using things like this in private markets. Just kind of, instead of being in the chat window all the time, he was using the API. And the way I had made a checklist a lot of times when I want to be in a stock or even a trade, but especially a longer term stock, maybe a year or two holding period or whatever, I would have a checklist of 8 or 10 things that I would look for. And I noticed, kind of like a Charlie Munger checklist, or whatever you want to call it, sentiment, pricing, fundamentals, integrity of management, a lot of the things that you see in the report. And I was always in the chat window, and then I would go between different LLMs, and he kind of turned me on to using the API, which means that you code those things into the back. So when you put in one stock symbol, it answers all your questions. And that was kind of my move into this thinking process. And then now it's just snowballed, where I have a list of probably 20 different things I want to add. And you're seeing some of them on the report, where the basic idea of the report isn't to say this is for sure good or bad. It's to say, can we get a way to compare apples to apples the best way possible? And that's what the price to sales price target thing does, in a conservative manner, where a lot of the guesswork is taken out of it for you. So if someone gives you a stock, like an elevator pitch or a stock tip, you could say, okay, let me throw this into my system. And if it's junk, I kind of discard it right away. But if it's interesting, then I go look deeper. So it helps me filter very quickly. And you can do that at scale with, I've built it on my own, where I have hundreds of stocks I can look at very quickly and then run the reports that you see. So that's kind of how it started and where it is. And it's going to keep evolving down that direction.
Yeah, so many things I want to say. Like, I think one thing is, like, yeah, you're coming at it from, some people are very, very fundamental, and everyone has different styles. And I think the way you were looking at it was, look, I'm looking at lots of charts and setups and interesting things all day. I can run this in 3 minutes and cover a lot of ground. Bull case, bear case, financial data. What are the narratives I can get? It can have the AI analyze 3/4 of transcript calls, not summarized transcripts for me to read, but just actually go through the transcript and tell me this and look for these and this things, red flag analysis. And also you can do this 10 stocks at a time. And that's when people sometimes say, like, oh, well, I'm kind of doing the same thing. I can ask questions in the chat window. And I'm like, yeah, but there's like 50 prompts we're running at once, and you can run it times 10 stocks. I mean, this is like industrial process here. It's like a lot. You can cover a lot more. It's yes, to some extent, some of this you could do in the chat window. Although one thing, Brad, I would say that I think is a little bit harder is also because we're mixing in the hard financial data and kind of keeping that separate from the AI, like making sure that when the AI is using data, it's actually pre-pulled in financial data that's coming direct from an API. So we're really trying to eliminate that hallucination, just make sure we know what the AI is working with when it starts to formulate the answer. So
Right.
I think that piece of mixing in the API and then prompting is a little bit more I think it's a bit of a special sauce. I mean, maybe world is moving quickly, and what special sauce today is maybe not
Yeah,
10 days from now, but for now, I think it's there's a lot. That's what I was trying to highlight earlier, was just how much work goes into this.
yeah, and I think, yeah, and to your point, a lot of it is your experience. If you have a lot of experience and you know what to look for, you can start prompting in that direction and get really good stuff back. But if you're just blindly asking questions that are not useful, so it really is the creativity of the people creating it. Not to say that it can't, of course it can be replicated, and you can do it in a chat window. It's just cumbersome. And what happens is when you're running these in parallel with each other, you start running multiple stocks and you say, okay, I'm looking at whatever it is, data centers or chemical companies, and you can quickly figure out fundamentally who are the top 2 or 3 players. Even globally you can do, which is very cool to do global, which a lot of places don't allow you to do. So that's the quantitative part. I mean, the kind of the neat part of the report is the qualitative part, I thought, where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, I've learned in the past that I really get burned when management has promises and they're priced in and they don't work, or management just doesn't stick to their promises. So can I track credibility, integrity of management using the machine without, that's a lot of work to do, but can I track conference calls and investor presentations? And you can do that. We can track promises and we can see what's priced in. And as we get more creative with what we're looking for, then we start asking it better questions. And you have better quantitative data, and now you have better qualitative questions. You put it together, and then the next thing is to add more sentiment data. What's the
Yes, and
positioning?
that's one of the things you did, where you said you asked the AI in one of the sections, how does the management talk on the conference call? Do they use a lot of hyperbole? Do they actually use targets and hard targets, or do they just? And I thought that's something we've never had before. A lot of people just say, "Oh, summarize the call," but you can also say, "Just tell me how they talk. Tell me what type of
Yeah.
language they use. Does it sound like BS, or does it sound quite conservative?" Anyways, I just think just to like you're saying, the new things that you can do with AI.
Yeah, because we always know when they say like we have a 10-point plan over 3 years, you're kind of like, yeah, this is junk. These are CEOs who are quarter to quarter, not always, but you just kind of smell that it's not, it's corporate.
Yeah.
And a lot of the good ones, they under promise, over deliver. They talk about the business, and you can tell that they're founder led, they're longer term. So one of the things is it founder led? Founder led companies have done so much better than the index, and
Yeah.
it's not a guarantee that you're going to have a victory if it's founder led, but it does weed out a lot of bad companies because they're thinking big picture.
That
They're
was one of the things in your checklist, right? If it's founder
Yeah,
led.
that's in there. You can see that too, and eventually we'll be able to just search for that. And the monopoly duopoly question is in there, which I think is interesting because that's sometimes harder to find.
Yeah,
And
you
I
had to like help to prompt the AI, like, do they talk about, pricing power, or just how many players in the industry concentrate, like because they might not say we're a monopoly. They might say a lot of other language that's telling you it's a monopoly, but in which I think you were trying to prompt out, like, here's the other ways it may actually be a monopoly. Network effect. Do they say that,
yeah,
moats, there might be things that they're saying that are telling you it's monopoly, but without saying it.
yeah, and I think that's tricky too because you wanna pick that information up because it's valuable, and
Yeah.
sometimes the AI has to kind of figure it out. So I've tried to give it hints of these are also monopolies, and this is why, and maybe you can figure out if this one is close to it, and it'll tell
Yeah.
me has characteristics of an oligopoly or a duopoly, but it has
Yeah.
one competitor, and it's nice because you can start to put that in a database then, and it's not perfect because sometimes if you run the reports on the OpenAI or the Claude or Grok backend, you'll get an error because it's overcrowded and the report will come out weird. And then you
Yeah.
run it again 5 minutes later and it'll work. So we've done a pretty good job of cleaning that up. But in some of the ADRs are a little goofy because they're all a little different. So that's
Yeah.
another thing that we're working on
Well,
cleaning up.
that is one of the things about AI, and I found and I was, when I did the talking about the AI workflows, the what's different is the output is not consistent, right? Like every time you ask it a question, could answer differently. It can answer in different lengths. The responses can take different times. So that's one of the technical aspects of working with AI, is just that this is not like in an Excel spreadsheet, 2 + 2 is 4, and it takes, no, this is
Yeah,
you're like dealing with a kind of a variable response and the time, and you kind of, there's just some working around that. So,
There is. Sometimes you'll get the different answer.
yeah.
It's similar, but it'll be a little different right after. And I'm thinking, what? We just did this, and the report's a little different, and it is a thing to work
Yeah.
on. So yeah, I don't know how to have the exact answers to fixing that, but I think it's such
We
an
do our
exciting.
best, right? You try to build in
Yeah,
as
you do
many
your best.
guidelines and
It's
guardrails
fun
to kind of,
too. I found the whole thing really fun, and I think you and I have talked a lot about this. Is just how exciting it is to be able to play with these. And if you have any ideas, you don't need to be a coder anymore. I always wanted to have a coding background, and I never did it in school. And now I feel like I was so intimidated in the beginning, but after 2 years of just doing this all the time, now they have Claude Code and Cursor and all these things you can do. And you're just limited only by what you can think of doing. You're no longer limited by your technical skill set, which is
Brad,
really an awesome time to be alive doing this.
this is why one of the main things I wanted to bring you on, because you, as you said, you traded futures and that was your background, and you had this really good sense of markets and having to, make your way in an extremely competitive, difficult market trading futures. But you wanted to build something, and you built a super complicated, this is over 5,000 lines of code. There are a few extra files for the front end. You built an entire app which handles user input through tickers. There's all sorts of edge cases I was pointing out about whether someone uses an ADR and what exchange it's on. Hosted on a server platform like Railway, which we used, and integrating that with a database. Brad, this is a complex app that you built with like no coding knowledge.
No coding.
And I'm like, right.
Zero. I didn't even know how to download I have some computer savviness just from enjoying being online and being a trader and but I think it's just curiosity and patience and resilience with this stuff, because you get stuck a lot. I subscribe to a lot of AI newsletters. I talk with friends. I enjoy taking all the things I've learned about the market and that I've read about and start to test them now with code and say, can we make a report? Like whenever there's something I do every day, I'm thinking, how do I make this shorter? How do I get an email? And then how do I make that email even better? And how do I get an alert when something I could be interested in shows up because it got cheap enough? How do I set alerts for the overall market? How do I set alerts for global markets? And then it just starts spiraling upwardly, where you start making shortcuts and innovations and little things. And
But like Claude, I think you use Claude for your coding, right? And
I like Claude the best right now, but I do dance around if I get stuck. But I find the newest Claude Opus to be really good for this stuff.
And Brad, I have to give you also really credit, because I've had this thing too where AI will really give you the confidence to try these projects and try new things and build things, because it's kind of right there as your expert, your personal expert. But there will be bugs and things that don't work, because you're often trying totally new pieces of software and things, and that you're kind of going beyond what a lot of times, and there'll be bugs. And what I really appreciate about you, that because I've done it myself, is you have to sometimes work through these bugs. And that's my goal. That's my advice to anyone. And I notice you're really good about it, is stuff will break, and that's just coding and development. And you have to just kind of get through it. And AI is really good at debugging this. And you kind of, if you talk, I find, don't you, that you'll get it figured out, but it may just take you a day that you didn't plan to spend doing that.
Yep. It's oftentimes where you need to come in as a human and say, we've been banging our head on the wall 10, 15 tries. I think you might be looking at this wrong, or let's look at it different. And it's prompting it to give it a little help, nudging it in a different direction sometimes to break through.
Yeah. I think this is the problem. Something else. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I'll try a new model. But like the characteristic you mentioned about getting through things is the same thing when you have losing trades, or you have a drawdown, or your process isn't working well. It's just to say, well, it's making me stronger because I needed this to become stronger. I have something that I didn't do enough due diligence. I traded too big. I didn't know my stuff or myself good enough. and that's why I screwed it up. It's always a lesson to get stronger. So I think I look at these setbacks the same way. It's like, well, I get to learn something else, and that kind of helps me not get super frustrated with it when it does this, because it can get long sometimes.
Well, I hope it's encouraging to everyone, because our message is A, to see if these reports are useful for you, but also just to kind of get people to come out of the chat window, and that you really, these AIs can just as easily really help you start building stuff in a way that's incredible. The coding ability and the help there. So, Brad, thank you. I think I know you have lots of ideas of other innovations to do with this. I also want to apologize to everyone that the fact that often at the beginning we ask for it sends you a email link to the report, and often it goes into people's spam, and that's actually my fault, and that's the part I worked on that didn't work very well. So I apologize to everyone for that, and if just it's probably in your spam folder if you don't get the link, but we'll try and iron that out. Maybe Brad will be able to help on that.
I mean, we did this. Doing this for yourself is one thing, but then when other people are relying on it, as you commercialize it a little bit, you get a lot more errors and mistakes about over traffic and emails. So
yeah,
you work through it, and when it's messed up, we fix some currency issues, and there'll always be things to fix.
Yes. I was talking about the market. There's inconsistencies about financial stocks and all these things.
Yep.
Brad, thanks very much, and thanks for coming on. I hope everyone gets encouraged to try things and build stuff themselves, because you've done such a good job with it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to talk about it.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, bye.